Yes, it's the dreaded international break. Hope everyone's tolerating it. I'm taking the days off one by one before that Crystal Palace match. But what we get with international breaks is a time for reflection, and what has been an absolutely incredible 3 weeks where Newcastle are unbeaten in 7 matches with some amazing nights along the way. Lots of goals scored and very few conceded. But what has changed from that awful day down at Brighton when all the pressure was getting piled on Mr. Howe, not from myself but from some quarters of Newcastle fans, journalists, media outlets, you name it? What has changed since the last international break that's turned things around so fast that we are flying high again? That's what I'm going to be talking about in this video, Newcastle fans. So if you're a little bit curious and you want a little bit of content Newcastle related during this awful international break, you know what to do. Make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Back Back there, you absolutely beautiful Newcastle fans. I hope you're having a decent enough week, you know, on the back of what has been that amazing 3 weeks that I mentioned on the intro to this video. You know, if ever there was a good time for an international break where we can just enjoy it and be happy supporting our team again, it's when we have just smashed PSG at home. We've scored goals galore in the Premier League. We are back to winning ways. We are not conceding many goals. And just generally speaking, we are absolutely class again. But yeah, these international breaks aren't ideal. I mean, I actually had to Google who England were playing. Did not realise they were playing on a Friday night against Australia. Will I be watching it? I'll probably be doing the washing. I'll probably be taking the dog out for a walk. I'll probably be organising my sock drawer. Because it just doesn't interest me. Even with Kieran Trippier in the ranks, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And it's something I think needs to change with these breaks. I understand matches have to happen to keep the players fresh to a degree, give them a chance to keep playing with each other so there's not too much time between. But it has to be better than these daft friendlies. And I mean, we've got another break in November, for God's sake. But Newcastle fans, before we get into the topic of today's video, do us a little favour, drop down, give us a little likey loo. Can't do the arm wave today. And if you like my opinion by the end of this video, whack that subscribe. Now, change of scenery for me today. I am over what is very fitting for this video, actually, if I'm being honest with you, Sir Bobby Robson Way. What an amazing name for an area. It's in Newcastle, just in Great Park, absolutely amazing. And it's interesting that that's where I'm videoing this, because if there was one manager who we were very hasty with in years gone by, and I was old enough to remember the Sir Bobby Robson era, it was him. It was 5 matches into the season. We'd just drawn 2-2 against Norwich at home. We got beat at Aston Villa when Bobby Robson took Shearer out the team and put Clivert in, and he went the journey. And he's one of the best managers we have ever had. Absolute legend, lovely man. No one has a bad word to say about Sir Bobby. But that was a regret, and we got Souness. I was never a fan, and that was the start of our decline. And he never got the time he deserved. And if I look back to some of the things I read about Eddie Howe when that Brighton game ended, the Brighton game was bad. We'd lost 3 games in a row, but some of the things being churned out were ridiculous. He's not an elite manager. Is he under pressure? Is he, you know, Richard Keys was saying he was one of the managers to get sacked by November. Talk Sport did a piece on it. Fans were calling him out saying, is he good enough? It was just ridiculous. And I'm not saying it was all Newcastle fans, but it was coming from some quarters. And I was never of that way of thinking, nor would I ever be, unless things were really bad over a long period of time. Because if there is one man in the world of football who deserves the faith of the country, of the football and eyes, neutrals, Newcastle fans, you name it, it's Eddie Howe taking a relegation threatened side, and I mean seriously relegation threatened, to battering PSG in the Champions League on the world stage, absolutely comfortably. It's Eddie Howe. I mean, the things he's done, I believe, all this talk about not being an elite manager, he's barely managed any clubs. He's had Bournemouth, which he did astronomical football manager, PC game type stuff with, taking them from the bottoms, the lows of the Football League all the way to the Premier League across seasons. So that was incredible. And he's come to Newcastle and done what he's done, but he's evolving as a manager all the time, and he does have what it takes to be an elite, and it was a load of rubbish. And to compare that to Sir Bobby Robson, what happened with him, let's not make those same mistakes. And I never thought that the board were ever considering looking at it. Yes, the Brighton game wasn't very good. We were off colour that day. But he's regrouped in the international break, and look where we're sitting. But what are the main things I think have changed that have helped turn around our performances? And yes, what I am going to point out before I go through these points, did the fixture schedule change a little bit? Of course it did. You know, we went from having Brighton, Man City, Liverpool, really, really difficult starts, statistically the toughest, to then having Sheffield United, Burnley, Brentford. No disrespect to them, but they did change. But, I think some things did change in our team, so let's get straight into them. First one for me, and you guessed it. I'm assuming you probably guessed it. How could I talk about what's changed since the last international break without mentioning the Geordie in the middle, Sean Longstaff? I've kept singing his praises. I probably sound like a bit like a stuck record, but he came back in and he secured his place back in the team. And I'm not saying he's the reason that we've won football matches again, but my God, that man has probably proved more when he's out of the team, just as much as when he's in it, as weird a statement as that sounds, how important he is to it. Not only has he freed up the likes of Bruno and Tonali when he's played to just do what they like to do and get further up the field, but he's plugged them really leaky gaps between midfield and defence where we've looked really, really weak and susceptible to chances being created from opposition. And he just does loads of work that maybe I and you don't even notice. The running, the miles he puts in, mopping the ball up, simply just picking that ball up, passing it on, and being totally fine with that. But he's linked up, even when he gets forward, he's linked up with Almiron, he's linked up with Trippier on the right-hand side. He's linked up as he does move into those final phases. Look what he did against PSG. He can get forward, he can make intelligent runs, and yes, his goal was a little bit fortunate. Should Donnarumma have done a little bit better? Yeah, but I'll tell you what, that goal was so deserved for a man playing his first Champions League game at home for Newcastle, which would have been a dream come true as it was for Dan Burn. And he's been absolutely brilliant, and I would go as far as saying now he's one of the first names on the team sheet. He's up there with Botman. I genuinely believe that, because if I look at that midfield, you are not telling me there is another combination that complements each other better, because Longstaff will always be in that conversation of who our best three is. Whether it's Longstaff, Bruno, Joe Linton that worked so well for us last season, whether it's Longstaff, Tonali, Joe Linton, whether it's Longstaff, Tonali, Bruno, which is, that's still an open for debate, that midfield three. And then you've got the likes of Anderson. He can play in there, but Longstaff is the one that doesn't get dropped. Not for first team matches, not for Premier League matches. And I look at some of his performances in these matches that we've played, and for me, AC Milan away, he was my man of the match. I know a lot of people might have said Nick Pope, maybe Trippier. Longstaff was so sure of himself, and he almost pinched it for us in what would have literally been pants off around my head scenes, and he's been absolutely brilliant. And that wasn't necessarily a tactical change or anything like that, but him coming back, there is no coincidence. And my God, is that man absolutely integral to everything we do well, if we had to continue the success we saw last season. Continue doing how you're doing, Sean, son. You're an absolute legend. And should you have got an England call-up, well, I'm not going to get into that debate on this video. I look at who Mr Southgate has called up for a game against Australia. Yeah, it would have been a nice chance to see what you could do. Next up for me, I'm going to stick with the midfield theme. And could I say that these two correlate to each other? Yeah, you probably could. It's Mr Bruno. And I've already done a video about him and how much he's improved, if you want to scan down and have a look at that. But we have got Bruno back. I don't care what anyone says. And has he been massively freed up because of Sean Longstaff? Of course he has. Of course he has. Them two, him coming back in the team and said, right, Bruno, you do what you like to do. Get that ball a bit further forward. Play with a bit more freedom. And do not worry about sitting in front of that back four. But let's not underestimate, Bruno still does the dirty work. On my Bruno video, I talked about how since the last international break, he was actually top of our stats, which was crazy. And some of them were really strange stats he was top of. Defensive stats, ball recovered, he was higher than Shah and Trippier. And that, surprises some people because you don't notice him do them things when he's playing. Oh, sun's coming down now. This is lovely. Lovely day to be in the tune. But yeah, with Bruno's fire back in his belly, we tick more. And I mean that more in an attacking sense. But, he plays with his heart on his sleeve, and we love to see that. I think that's why he's been adopted by the Geordies so well, and he really loves it round here. He celebrates tackles, but also he's playing riskier passes. He's linking up better. He's getting forward at every opportunity. Obviously, he got his goal against Sheffield United, which was very, very well taken. I think the whole team pretty much scored that day. But he is, when he's firing, we see what a player he is. And when he's in the form he is right now, Bearing in mind he's done it on the Champions League stage as well, which is what he's always wanted to do for us, and he's playing well for Brazil as I make this video. He is one of the best midfielders in the Premier League. I haven't said that for a while now because the Bruno post-cup final has never been at the races. He really, really hasn't. Now we are seeing the pre-cup final Bruno. And yeah, what was wrong with him before that international break? We don't know. Was it his newborn baby? Was it the contract talks that were ongoing that were maybe playing on his mind? Is that going to get sorted? Is it not? We don't know. Was it the fact that Longstaff wasn't in there and he was playing that slightly different position? And was it just a case of him worried about Tonali maybe taking all the glory away from him as that pin-up boy in midfield? There are so many factors that we could speculate. But he wasn't the same player, and it was okay to criticise him. Not in a negative way, not calling him out. We still love the player himself, but when a player's not playing well, it's okay to say it. He's back now, and it's been absolutely integral in us improving as a football team. Next up for me, sorry if the wind's getting bad by the way, right out on the main roads now, has to be the squad rotation. We talked about how our squad was finally looking better, and I feel like Eddie Howe, across those 7 matches since the last international break, has proved that we do have the quality to compete with some of the best, but still move the squad around and keep players fresh to a degree. And what I mean by that is Man City in the Cup, for example. You know, it was a tough Cup game. They made changes, but they still had the likes of Jack Grealish, Alvarez playing. We brought in Livramento, man of the match. Absolutely amazing. He looked absolutely class. It's just unfortunate for him that Trippier's always going to be better for that first team spot right now. Isak and Wilson have rotated. You've got Murphy starting matches. He started in Milan. He didn't get much chance to contribute, but we've got Tonali and Elliot Anderson who can be rotated. We've got Joelinton and Willock to come back in that midfield. And squad rotation is not something as a fan that I've ever had the luxury supporting this beautiful football club of saying, do you know what? We have that in our locker. In a cup game like Man City with Champions League as well, I would be more used to Newcastle teams playing not unheard of academy players, but really experimenting. If you look back over the Ashley years, who we've had to play when we've gone third rounds of the Cup in the FA Cup and whatnot, we've never been able to play the team, the sort of side like Tonali hadn't had a sniff massively. Livramento, hadn't had a sniff. Or Hall, who's such a prospect at left back, and they come in for Man City for us to actually see some debuts, some starting debuts. And Eddie Howe is proven, yes, you'll chuck the fixtures at me, our experimental teams might not be absolutely world class like our first team is, but we've still got players in our locker. Sorry, I just don't want to get killed whilst making this video. We've still got players in our locker who can contribute and get over the line against a team like Man City, and that's exactly what we did. And wasn't it amazing to see? So yeah, squad rotation is huge. That's become a factor for this team now, and long may that continue. It's exciting because it means that we can go in the FA Cup in January, hopefully progressing the Carabao against Man United, because wouldn't that be nice, and still not burn out too much as long as injuries don't continue to screw us. Finally for me, individual errors, and that's going to sound a really simple one. If you look back at some of the games that we lost in that little run that we were on, that barren run, Brighton, Aston Villa, which we beat, but I'll talk about that in a second, Liverpool, some of the goals we were conceding, we were always the makers of our own downfall. Even Villa's goal when we battered them was us giving the ball away and then not having enough numbers to deal with Diaby when they crossed it in. Liverpool's 2 goals, as much as I think Klopp got one up on Eddie Howe in the last 15 minutes of that match, we weren't very good defensively. Matt Targett, Dan Burn, we all remember Núñez running in, but we weren't that solid at the back for those, and Bruno gave the ball away for the second one. That was another one that was our own downfall. And then we all remember Brighton, Nick Pope for the first one, the way that Ferguson for their second was able to run through the middle of the lines and get a shot off with no one closing him down. We've got rid of some of them mistakes, and it's no surprise that by doing that we have shored up and not conceded many goals. Was it a case of match sharpness with the season starting? Was it a case of Eddie Howe rotating midfielders, Tonali bedding in, Barnes bedding in? We don't know, but when you make mistakes you concede goals and you give yourself a harder chance of winning matches. That's been cut out now because it was very unfamiliar under Eddie Howe, and sure enough the results have got better. So sometimes it can just be as simple as switching on, increasing that concentration and not conceding daft, stupid mistakes. So that's been a big factor since the last international break for sure. And finally, from me, Newcastle fans, I just want this to be a good lesson for some quarters. When I did a video post Brighton 3 weeks ago, there were so many comments about Eddie Howe not being elite. Maybe we do need a change. Lots of it, mad negativity. let's not, going back to what I mentioned about Bobby Robson in the location that I'm currently walking around in at the start of this video, we still talk about him being sacked as a huge mistake 5 matches into the season after everything he'd done for this football club. Whatever the reason Shepherd made that, you know, that's a different argument for a different day, digging the past up. But let this be a lesson that, my God, we have a wonderful manager, and do not hit the panic button just because he loses 3 matches in a row against really difficult opposition. We are not always going to be dancing in a field of roses. We will get little difficult patches. We will get players out of form. We will make mistakes. But stick by the manager, who has done an incredible job, who I honestly believe could go on to be an elite. And let's face it, things have never been that bad since the season started. We played well against Liverpool and should have won. Man City's the hardest place to go in world football, and we didn't let them play their proper game. Villa, we battered them, and Brighton was just an off day. So keep the faith, Newcastle fans. We've got players to come back from this international break, which is so exciting, so exciting. Where this squad could go. Botman to come back, Joe Linton, Willock's going to start kicking a football again, although it might be a little bit longer for him. And that'll really give us a bit of a lift. And the fixtures aren't too bad, but we've got those incredibly exciting Champions League games to come up. We've got Palace, Wolves, Man United in the cup. We take 7,500. Keep the faith, and let's just keep rolling with this. The momentum's with us. It's almost a shame that the international breaks come, but you can see the benefits with players coming back from injury. Keep the faith, Newcastle fans. If you've liked this video, drop down, give us a little likey and subscribe. Just stay patient with this international break. Palace at home, and Eddie Howe's Mags will be back soon. I'm off for a Morrison's meal deal because I'm absolutely clamming. Whack that subscribe if you've liked this video. How are you, lads?